Of friends of the Columbia School of Professional Studies Information and Knowledge Strategy program. So we have our faculty, we have students, we have alumni, but we also, I believe, have or will have some guests who join us. And we're a friendly group, so feel free to stay with us and stick around. I'm Ed Hoffman. I'm the academic director for the program. One of the things I've mentioned is we have our program. We're in the process of recruiting for the next grade class, and we've extended the deadline through June 15th. So if you're interested, or if you know of people interested, let us know. IKNS is a program that really looks to turn information and data into knowledge through the collaboration of people, the use of strategy, and leveraging information management technology and analysis. This is one of the offerings that we fortunately have great support from a very active and engaged community of practice. And one of our leaders, Valerie Sishi-Grigsman, who is center stage with a glass of wine, I think, in her left hand, and is going to be happy to talk to you about getting involved in terms of the community, and also if you're a guest, learning more about the program. And I want to thank Valerie. Also want to thank Julie Langford and Joel Ruffin for helping to help us with this distinguished speaker series. The purpose of the series is once a month to really have topics that are of interest to our students and our faculty and guests related to information, knowledge, and how to be successful in modern organizations. Judging from the reaction, we hit the right theme on this one. I'll introduce our guest who will take over shortly. Carley Jacobson is a strategic or a strategy designer at Business Models Incorporated, where she supports organizations with strategy, business model generation, and value proposition. One of the things that I always say, that before you get into the tools or techniques, you really need to understand the environment. You really need to have a good assessment tool, a good model of what's going on. And one of the most successful recently, and I got my book here, Business Model Generation. It really lays out in a very effective way, how do you work with organizations, how do you do design thinking, and how do you set yourself up for changes to be successful. And this is one of a series of works that does that. So Carley will be talking about design thinking in relation to business model generation. Before that, she worked at Autodesk and has got a quite interesting background in terms of a lot of these type of activities. So without any further ado, let me turn it over to Carley, and I'll start off by thanking you for taking the time to come and talk with us.
Thanks for having me. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so everybody can see what I'm looking at. Okay, there we go. Everybody, thumbs up? Okay, I see some thumbs up. So thanks, Ed, for the great introduction. As he mentioned, what we're really going to be talking about today is utilizing design thinking for business strategy. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of what the term design thinking, and you're maybe like, what does that actually mean, and how can I actually apply that to the work that I'm doing? So in this talk, we're really going to focus on, how can we actually make this grounded and tangible for you, and hopefully you can leave with something that you're like, I can actually, go take a step after this talk and I have something that I can actually execute on. So again, what are we going to be doing today? We're going to be, using the principles of design thinking. And design thinking is a process for creative problem solving. There's a scientific method, lots of different types of methods for solving problems. Design thinking is really about, it's this creative process. It's about being a designer. If you think about designers, someone like this guy, this is Karl Lagerfeld. We could put Johnny Ives up here. We could put any type of designer you really think of. It doesn't have to be a specific industry. But a designer, they're really about prototyping and iteration. If you think about Karl Lagerfeld, he's a fashion designer. When he decides to do his next runway show, he's not just going to draw 16 dresses and then put them on the runway the next week. He's going to, probably sketch 100, 200 different dresses. He's going to, from those couple sketches, he's going to pick out maybe 10 that he really loves. And he's like, okay, Now maybe I want to go and get some fabrics and kind of, test out what this dress could look like, or these dresses could look like, get them on a person, see maybe the fit's right, the trim's wrong. And so what he does is he has this process of iteration from these kind of low fidelity prototypes, slowly from real life to sketches, and kind of testing with little tests to see what dress is the right dress to do. So that's really the process of design, is really that prototyping and that iteration. So when we're talking about design thinking, we really want to be bringing that designer mindset, especially as business people, as business professionals. We really want to be, how can we think about ourselves as designers? The other part of that design thinking, like I mentioned, it's about experimentation. You probably hear the words, it's okay to fail, that phrase a lot. But how can we think about failing where we're not doing one big epic fail, but lots of little tests and prototypes? So when maybe an experiment does fail, well, it's, we only have a little bit on the line, or it's kind of micro little tests. So that's another part of the design thinking process that we want to think about. Other huge part, I'm sure that you've heard, that goes along with the design thinking is this really important part of empathy. It's how can we really feel how our customers feel, and how can we really try to, get in the mindset of our customers as a designer. So that's another part of this design thinking. So what we're really going to go over today and how we can actually apply these to our work is we're going to talk about some new tools, some new skills, and some new mindsets. And these are kind of the basis of this talk and the basis of actually the work that I do. And why is this so important? So business as usual is dead. You see this everywhere. We actually, I and my colleagues tell people to stop writing business plans. I mean, it takes you 3 months, 6 months to write a business plan, and then the first customer contact, you're disproving things that you could have maybe proved earlier or disproved earlier. They're filled with assumptions. So how can we actually think about using this designer mindset to slowly build out the case for a business without just locking ourselves in a room and writing a business plan, but really getting out into the world? And, our shared goal is, of course, to design a better business and to grow in profitability. It sounds design thinking, it's designers. Do they really care about profit? Yes. Super important with this designer mindset and design thinking, applying it to business strategy to think about that. So, like I mentioned, we're going to give you tools. And so with that, I will jump into a little bit about who I am and give you a little bit of a background. My name's Carley Jacobson. I started my career at this website called Instructables.com. So I definitely have that maker designer in my blood. I actually started as a content creator it's a DIY website. So I posted DIY tutorials. I have I think about 14 million page views. So kind of a little bit of an internet celebrity, which is kind of fun. And these are some of the projects that I've made. So this is a suitcase that I turned into a picnic table, put in some speakers into that. It can carry all your picnic stuff and a few other fun things that I've made. So that's kind of my designer background. As I'd mentioned, Instructables, actually a year into me working there, got acquired by Autodesk. So all in all, I was there for about 6 years, doing lots of different things on the consumer products team there. A lot of things around community, a lot of things around new product launches and new services. And during that time, I actually got my MBA in design strategy from California College of the Arts. It's the DMBA program. It's a really amazing program in San Francisco that I was lucky to both work at Autodesk and get my MBA there at the same time. And now I work for Business Models, Inc. And so we're Business Models, Inc. And we redesign businesses. And it's really important that we pop out the word design because, it's all about how are we using that tool set of designers. And like I mentioned with those, those different jars with the money, it's really about direct results and getting to the bottom line and creating results with teams. It's, all of the work that I'm going to be showing you, it's all about co-creation. How can we do this with groups of people and kind of bring those different mindsets together? Maybe someone that you wouldn't think should be in the room while you're, creating your strategy for your business or, doing any type of ideation. It's getting those unusual suspects in there. And we launched out of our first book, Business Model Generation, which outlined a tool called the Business Model Canvas, which we'll dive into more. And we're global. We're a global team. The reason I kind of shout that out, and also with my DMBA, is I know that your program is very remote and very global. And I think that's really important to be, to have that touch with, different countries and different people around the world. So we're all across the world. And then our most recent book, Designer Better Business, which we'll really be diving into today, is about, well, we've got these tools like the business model canvas, and we've got these tools like value proposition canvas. But what's the process? We really want to think about what's the process for applying design thinking for business strategy. And why is business model innovation so popular? Well, the world has changed. Obviously, all of these products you see here now you can find in just one device. So it's changing very fast. If you see this in the grocery store, it's, from shopping to groceries to Amazon Fresh, now even, meal kits. In education, I mean, what we're doing right now, it goes from the classroom, which we couldn't have done what we're doing before, but now we have the opportunity for these remote sessions and these remote classes, which is amazing and really kind of democratizes education in a way. In financing, going from just I have to go to my bank to I can crowdsource. And then in retail, going from the traditional mall to now we've got these Amazon warehouses that, maybe, it's not likely that, the malls are going to go away, but now, what's their function now? Are they a showroom? How does that fit into our business model? Now that we have this capability of distribution and warehousing and online and e-commerce, what does that mean for the rest of our business model? If we change one thing on it, well, everything else changes. So if you Google business model, maybe if people can either unmute themselves or they can type in the chat box, what are some of the things that you think of when you think of business model? What are some of the thoughts around that you typically think of? So I see rigid process, strategic, organization design, environmental scan, value proposition, definitely. How do you make money? All about that bottom line, exactly. How do you make money? So when I Google business model, this is what I get. I don't know what you guys find when you Google business model, but the really important thing about the business model is coming up with this common language. Everybody has different definitions, and it's really, what is a business model? All the things that I heard definitely fit into this definition. What we describe a business model are kind of, common definition is a business model describes how an organization creates, delivers, and captures value. So it's really important, those three different sections, if you kind of slice and dice it. You've got the creating value. How are we creating value for our customers? How are we delivering that value to them? And then how are we capturing value for our own business? So it's really thinking about that word value. That value, of course, can be money. It can be lots of different things. So it's really about how are we creating and delivering and capturing value. So I'm going to walk through the business model canvas. I know some of you may have seen this before. The business model canvas has 9 building blocks on it. I like to think of it as a business plan, but on a page. So it's, it's not about that 100-page business plan, but, it's really about how can we think about a business plan on a page. The really important part of the business model is, in the canvas, is how can we create a common understanding within our company, whether we're at I have an idea phase or whether we're at a huge, Fortune 500 company and we're, on an existing team, and maybe, there's kind of different definitions of how we're currently operating. How can we get that common understanding? So customer segments, I'll just walk through. So customer segments are, it sounds pretty straightforward. It's who are our customers, but there's a little bit of nuance to it. So I like to use the example of a hospital. So a hospital, we have hospital, their service is healthcare. That's their value proposition. It's healthcare. So they provide the healthcare to the patients. That's who receives their service. But if you think about that, who's actually paying for the service? It's probably family members, very likely insurance. Who's making decisions about, the payment? Insurance, for sure. So you really want to think about who receives the value proposition or the product or service, who makes decisions about where that product or service goes, and then who pays for it. So you really want to think about what are those different, it's really different stakeholders. So those are your customer segments. And I keep mentioning the word value proposition. So value proposition is at the center of the canvas. And I divided into two halves. The first half of the value proposition is the product or service. It's literally, what do we make as a company? What do we provide as a company? The second half of that is about what are the promises that come along with that product or service. So Dropbox, I love that example because, well, Dropbox is a file sharing software, file sharing tool. There are other file sharing tools and different file sharing tools. So that's the first half of their value proposition. The second half of their value proposition are the promises, which are your files are going to be transferred safely. They're going to sync across all your devices. They're going to go immediate and be, go really fast syncing. So these are the types of things that you want to think about for value propositions. It's what is it? What is the product or service? And then what are the promises and the benefits that go along with that? And then we talk about delivering value. So we've got creating value, and delivering value is all about the channels that you're delivering the value to your customer. So the channels are, how are your customers finding out about your value proposition? How are they finding out your product? Kind of straightforward, a shampoo company, it's probably going to be on the shelf of the supermarket. That's their channel. Maybe if it's an app, it's going to be in the Apple Store. If it's an agency or, more of a consulting, it's probably going to be through a sales team or an account team. So really want to think about what are those channels that are bridging your customers to your products. And then the other side of that is also, how are you creating relationships with your customers? It's really important to, a lot of times you always hear about when companies are doing a terrible job creating these customer relationships, especially now with, technology and social media blows up if you have really bad customer relationships and you're not really considering that as a core part of your business model. I love to use the example of Sephora because that's a company I love. And if I'm at say Nordstrom and I'm out of perfume and I see my perfume, I would say, I'll just wait till I go to Sephora because, I have a Sephora card and I'm going to get the points. I'm going to get free samples. I'm going to get all these other things that come along, all these other benefits that come along, that I'm giving myself a whole other errand to run, even though it's literally right there and it's the same exact price. They've created this customer relationship with me that is super, super tight. Companies like Starbucks, rewards cards, they're not the only form of customer relationships. You think about like a Facebook, their customer relationship is really community driven. I mentioned the agency example before. Their customer relationships are usually really one-to-one personal. You have your dedicated account manager. It's very highly personal. So different customer relationships are really important to build. Another one is revenue streams. Of course, got to show me the money. So it's about, how can we monetize this? There's lots of different, there's a lot of different ways to think about revenue streams. Of course, a really popular model for revenue streams right now is subscription services. That's very popular now. You also have, licensing. You have kind of pay per use or pay per service. Freemium models are also really popular right now. Lots of different ways that you can really get creative with how you're actually monetizing. So this half of the canvas, this is the right half of the canvas, and this is really what we call the front side of the canvas, the front stage. With any company, even if I don't work there, I don't know anybody, you can kind of dissect this half of their canvas. You can pretty much, this is all the outward facing stuff that you could dissect to some degree. The other half of the canvas, the left half, is the backstage. So this is a little bit more operational, and how are we actually creating the value proposition and actually finding our customers. So the first one that we have is key resources. So I like to think of key resources as something that we have. So that we own as a company to actually create our value proposition. So again, if we're a software company, we probably, it's really talent is really, you know, the coders are really your key resources, are the people actually coding, probably some also like IT infrastructure. If you are a more physical goods company, then whether maybe it's your manufacturing plants, maybe it's your goods that you have to grow, maybe if you're a farm, it's your land and it's your, you know, seeds. It could also be intellectual property, anything like that that you need to have to bring that value proposition to life. On the kind of complementary end to that is the key activities. So key activities are, if you think of key resources as things you have, key activities are things that you do to actually make your key, to make your value proposition. So this could be things like, you know, the key activities, marketing, sales, like I mentioned with the coders, coding is key activity, you know, manufacturing, if you're a one-man show and you knit scarves and you sell them online, then knitting is your key activity. So really think about what are we doing. The next one is a really interesting bucket is the key partnerships. I mean, nowadays you can't really do everything on your own, or it's a very, you know, it's a business decision. Do we want to do everything on our own, or do we want to, you know, what capabilities do we not want to have internally, and what capabilities we're like, wow, that's where a partnership would happen. So it's, you know, you really want to think really critically about what types of key partnerships, how can we shift our business model, really thinking about key partnerships. And finally, cost structure. So this is really, I kind of think of it as the sum of everything on the left side of the canvas, the sum of doing all the activities and the sum of acquiring all the resources. And so there you have your business model canvas. And like I mentioned, it looks very flat, but if you change one thing on the canvas, it really does affect everything. And I'll show you that in our next example. But you could really think about wrapping the canvas around a sphere and really think about, wow, if I change one thing, everything's going to change. Another really important thing to think about, I mean, imagine trying to do this for Google or do this for Amazon, just to get them on one page. You can build a business model canvas for any company. You can build a business model canvas for certain business units of a company. It depends on the granularity and kind of the level that you want to go. You can kind of think of these business models as, you know, those transparencies that you kind of can put on, and as you add another transparency, it has like a few more things on it. You can kind of think of the canvas like that. So yeah, that's the business model canvas. I'll walk through an example because I think it's always good to ground this in examples. I'll go pretty fast. So this is example of Nespresso coffee. So the business model canvas or the business model of Nespresso. So their value proposition is great coffee that you can enjoy at your home or your office. So the product is coffee, and it's coffee pods, and it's the machines, and the benefits that come along with that you can enjoy it at home, you can enjoy it, you know, in your office. The other part of that is the customer segment. So the two customer segments, if we kind of keep it fairly high level, are people in their offices and people at home. So it's pretty straightforward. The channel, so this is a really interesting part of their business model. This is what I would say makes, you know, Nespresso and Nespresso unique, and it's a good example of how changing one part of the canvas actually changes a couple different parts of the canvas. So if we look here, so Nespresso actually used to be in the grocery store. A lot of people don't realize this, but they started in the grocery store, next to Folgers, next to all those other coffee beans and stuff that you find at the grocery store. One of the big things that they did is they pulled it out of the grocery store, and they had these new more private channels, which are their Nespresso stores. You can call and order Nespresso. You can go to Nespresso.com. You can order by mail. The only place you can't get it is in the grocery store. So what's really interesting about that is you don't really know who your customer is when you're selling at the channel of a grocery store. You probably can get a lot of great information around market segmentation, and we know that moms from this age buy this coffee, and we sell a lot in Milwaukee, but maybe not so much over here. You know that much information, but you don't actually know who your customer is by name. Their customer relationship now that they pulled it out of, see how they pull it out of that one channel, it changes their customer relationship. So now they have this Nespresso club, and so they can actually, they know the name of their customers. They know exactly where they live. They know what type of coffee that they like. They know when they're running out of coffee. They have information that says, they're able to call their customers and say, I see you're running out of pods. Do you want me to order you some more? They're able to say, I see you like to drink this thing. We actually just have this new blend that we just launched. I think you're going to like it because I know you like dark roasted and all these other things. So they have a ton of information. So we see these two blocks change, but actually, before I jump to my next point, so their revenue stream, they have this kind of bait and hook model. So they sell coffee machines, not that they're cheap, but they're not really making, their money off of selling coffee machines. They're making it off of the recurring pod sales. So it's like the classic printer model where it's just, you buy the printer and then the ink cartridges are super expensive. So that's their model. But the point that I was going to bring up before of how we change a channel, we change the customer relationship. Now the key resources change. One of the key resources that they have is now data, so that you can have multiple things appear in different sections. So we've got the Nespresso Club in the customer relationship, and we also have it in the key resource. They, of course, as a food company, they have manufacturing and packaging as part of their key resources, so these plants. And then they actually they don't anymore, but they used to have the patent for the pods. So that was a really big part of their key resources.
Hey, Carley.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention, because I know we talked about taking questions now or at the end. There are a couple of questions, one having to do with how do you adapt a model for entrepreneurs who are driving change? Mm-hmm. And the other from Walter is, how do we view companies like Uber or Airbnb from the standpoint of, I guess, the partnering aspects? So I didn't want to interrupt you, but if you want, questions, those are some of the things coming up now, or we can wait to the end.
Yeah, for Uber and Airbnb, I guess the question is thinking of them as partners, or who would be their partners, or I would think that, Airbnb is an interesting one, and Uber are really interesting. They have a multi-sided platform, and we would bucket their drivers for Uber and then the homeowners probably in the key resources. You could make a good argument, and I don't think there's a right or wrong answer about putting them in the partners. But I think I would put them in the key resources. One of the things that Airbnb has different from their business model from, a hotel chain is that they don't have all the assets in their key resources, but this pool of homeowners that are willing to post on their platform. Key partners, I think key partners for those types of companies would be maybe payment systems, or, other companies that they're plugging into that, maybe with Uber Eats, some of the restaurants that they're working with, those would also be customers. So some things can appear in different spots. So I'll finish the example, because I have actually in the key partners something interesting about Nespresso. So I'll get to the last question at the end. Key activity is pretty straightforward. Their marketing, their delivery and fulfillment, and they're, actually processing the food. Key partners. So this is a really interesting one. So I kind of draw the line for key partners. If we usually don't put in suppliers for key partners, because, and again, it really depends. If you can pick and replace your supplier, and tomorrow your business, maybe you have a little bit of a hiccup because we have to change the system over a little bit, or we have to kind of, do a little bit of paperwork, but essentially your business isn't going to have a huge hiccup, then they're probably not a key partner. They're just a supplier. But if your business is so integrated into that company, if that supplier goes out of business because, and they, do some customization for your parts or your supplies, then they probably would be a key partner, especially if you're interacting with them to kind of have that customization of that product or that service. I think for a lot of Apple developers, people that are kind of, developing anything on Apple's platform, anybody that posts the store on Amazon, for those small businesses, Amazon is a key partner for them. Amazon probably shows up in lots of other places on their business model, but that is a key partner. If Amazon shuts down, that, well, okay, maybe they can find another storefront like an Etsy, but it's not going to be like an Amazon. It's not going to have that reach for them. So for Nespresso, a lot of people think that their key partner would be the coffee farmers. That's a lot of people say, oh, the coffee farmers. But Nespresso buys their coffee on more of a commodities market. So they say that bag over there is 52 cents, that bag over there is 48 cents. But if you think about like a Blue Bottle, their value proposition is actually a little bit different than an espresso. You could actually, well, it's both coffee, their key partners might be the coffee growers, because they might have really deep relationships with the coffee farmers that are, we're really trying to grow this and we're really trying to do that. And they might actually build their business all the way from the level of, we're going to design, kind of like artisanally design these coffee beans. So different coffee companies might have key partners as coffee growers. Some might not, if they're just, if their value, Nespresso's value proposition is a little bit different from these other types of companies. We actually consider their key partners as the manufacturers of the machines. So Nespresso is owned by Nestle, and so Nestle is in the food manufacturing business. And so what they do really well is they make food. What they don't do really well, or what they're trying, not really in the business of, is making machines and electronics. So they partner with companies like a DeLonghi or, other types of companies that can help them, build those machines. So that's really where we would see the key partners. And then the cost structure is pretty straightforward. It's kind of putting a price tag on all of these different key activities and key resources, fulfillment, maintenance of the warehouses and actually doing all of the stuff in the warehouses. And then, of course, huge budgets on marketing and sales. And so, I mentioned that their patent ran out. And so, all of these different competition, it's not a box on the canvas, but I'll talk a little bit later how that kind of plays into this. But, competition can kind of make your canvas a little bit vulnerable, or things that you want to think about. And, 1201 on the dot, when their patent ran out, you see these N cups and K cups and all these different things coming up. And what do you want to do when maybe your business model is threatened, or, you always want to be disrupting yourself, is thinking about disruption. This is just a really fun example of the baby Nest, which is, really, it's formula. Nestle is the biggest formula provider in the world, baby formula. And so they have this technology. So not only do they have the technology, they can kind of repurpose it. They've got the pods, they've got the machines. But actually, if you think about it, the people that are owning and drinking Nespresso, young parents that are tired and need coffee to stay awake, or, dads that need coffee to stay awake and can't breastfeed. So they, so this is not only is it a interesting kind of shift of their business model on a technology and product side, but it's also thinking about those customer segments. So it's, how can we think about innovating in different areas along the business model canvas? So what I think's the fun part about this is really talking about this process of innovation is not a black box. So I'm really going to jump into how we use design thinking for business model innovation and building strategies. Like, how are we really building real strategy? So it follows a process. A lot of times people hear the word innovation everywhere nowadays, and they're like, what is it? It's kind of hard to grasp. What is innovation? What does it really mean? We actually have a process that we use that really, we kind of ground it, innovation for business model. So the process of innovation and strategy design. So I'm going to walk through these 4 phases, and I imagine there'll be lots of questions at the end around this process, because it's, we have only about 50 or so minutes, but I could go as deep into any one of these segments as you could imagine. So the first phase is understand phase. And if you're familiar with design thinking, these 4 phases are really going to be like, yeah, that looks very familiar to me. It's all about in design thinking. And what Ed was saying before is like, we really need to get a grasp on the world today. We really need to ground ourselves. That means a lot of different things. That means grounding ourselves in who our customers are, grounding ourselves in, all the different factors, economic, what have you, competition. So the first thing that we do is we build out our business model canvas today. What does it look like April 19th, 2018 today? And how are we operating? If you're working if you're an entrepreneur, which I bet a lot of you are working at a current company, I think that question was asked before, you can do this process. We've done it again at the kind of C-suite, board level, all the way to more product team level. We've done it with HR teams. We've done it, kind of with sub teams, but it's what is the business model of whether it's our team or our product or our service. We do that. And then we do kind of a strengths and weaknesses SWOT, if you will, on, what's working today. And then we go into what we call the design criteria. So part of the design criteria is the context canvas. So what is the world? I like to think about it as your business model has, legs and arms, and it's walking around in a world. And what world does that look like? It's walking around, and there's other business models there, and there's other factors that are affecting it and pushing it. And so that's the context. So, thinking about things like competition, what are the uncertainties what are the unknowns? What don't we know? What are the trends that are happening? So there's lots of different factors that we want to look into about this world that our business model lives in. And then the other part of this is it's really, really important in any innovation or design thinking process to have the strategic vision part. You need a direction that you're going, because how do we know where we're going, and how do we know if we got there if we don't really have a really clear vision? Especially in the business world, you can have two different companies. Maybe one company's vision is, we really just want to be like a local, maybe 3 chain or 1 chain, and we just want to grow to like a team of 10, and we would be thrilled if that happens. There's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly fine. That's your vision. That's going to affect the rest of the process. If you're like, we want to IPO in 5 years, and we want to, dominate the world, and we want to be a global company, that's going to be a very different vision. So it's really about thinking about what is that vision you have. And another canvas that's not shown here is what we actually call the design criteria. In any innovation process, you don't want to box yourself in too much. It's like, we want to kind of leave the options open, but you do want to kind of think about what are the guardrails, where are we it's like the bumpers in any, bowling game. Where are the guardrails that we're like, okay, we're not going to go that way. If we go that way, we kind of are off course. I worked with an auto company. They're a manufacturing company. They manufacture auto parts. And one of the things that they're like, that's out of our scope is flying cars. They're like, that's out of the scope. And there's nothing wrong with that. They're just like, that's when we know, that's kind of where we're putting the bounds and the limits. But, within everything else, autonomous and all the other stuff, that's in scope, and we're pretty much open as long as it's on ground. So this is the understand phase. And then ideation. So, once you have that kind of understanding of the world, it's all about going into ideate. We specifically, for our design thinking process, and I didn't mention this before, but you can use design thinking. The definition was it's, creative problem solving. I have friends from my MBA that are working in government using design thinking to solve civic problems. I have friends that are working for nonprofits. I have friends that are, doing all sorts of different things. I happen to be using that skill set more of a, solving business problems. I say that because, when we think about this as a design thinking process, and all design thinking process have ideation portion of them, we really focus the ideation around shifting of the business model, and where can we really see, where can we really pull, for example, the Nespresso channel and change that slightly. That changes the rest of the canvas. We really focus the ideation around how can we really see those little changes, and really, that makes, with the Airbnb, their change was, we don't own hotels anymore. That changes. Now we have a platform. Now we're exponential. Now we have all these different things. So what we'll do is we'll have companies kind of think about what happens if we apply these different business model patterns. So these are things like, thinking about different subscription revenue type models. We'll have them do fresh watching, which is if we were to kind of take this business model and plop it on top of our company, what would that mean for us? So like, we're the Airbnb of, or we're the Uber of. It's not really to be like, we're just trying to plop the business models on, but it's like, let's play around with what happens if we do that. Does it shift anything else that's really interesting for us? One I really love is epicenters. So what if we were to get rid of everything on our canvas of our current company and keep one thing on there? So say we do a key resources epicenter. We have all the resources that we currently have. What new products and services could we make? Or say we have all the customers that we currently have. We're going to keep all our customers. What new value propositions can we sell to them? What else could we think about, selling to them? Or, we have our current value propositions. What other channels could we distribute these value propositions through? So really try to take that lens of, how can we look at the canvas differently? Lots of what if type questions. What if, we sold everything 10x the price? Well, what does that change about how we're, what our value proposition has to be way more compelling? Well, how do we make a more compelling value proposition? The goal here is, it's a huge brainstorm, and the goal is to come up with a handful, maybe 8 to 12 different business model canvases. And, it's not about finding that one business model option, that perfect business model option. It's never going to happen. It's about finding options that we can go then validate again, because it's like that we talk about that business plan. A lot of people in the ideation session will do the canvases and they're like, I love this idea. We want to go implement it now. It's like, well, it's still filled with all these question marks and assumptions along the 3 lines of customer desirability, business viability, and technical feasibility. So we really want to test along all of those different lines with prototypes as a designer. And then, of course, the last phase is implementation and scale. The process looks very linear, but it's actually it's this kind of loop, infinity loop over, an axis of time. So it's really, how can we do these little test cycles and this validation over this axis of time? So just to kind of close it off, and I want to make sure, I know we have a lot of great questions. There we go. So just some additional tools that I'm going to shout out. I'm just going to kind of not even touch too deeply on them, but just to think about in this process, the strategic visioning. Really, we do these cover story things to really think about what if your business was on the cover of a magazine, what would it say? And this is really to pull out ambitions and really, thinking big about, where you want to go. 5 bold steps. I think I might have shown this in one of the examples, but it's about not only coming up with a vision statement, but really thinking about how it shows up in your business. What are the themes that show up in your business? Understanding the customer. This is the value proposition canvas. That's the middle part of the business model canvas. It's such a meaty, you could go so deep into value propositions. So we built our own canvas around that. You can build the value propositions around doing customer journey maps and persona canvases and empathy maps and lots of different tools for that. Experimentation, we have, I mentioned the word assumptions, assumptions around customer desirability, business viability, technical feasibility. Well, what are our riskiest assumptions and what can we kind of go out and test first? I think Google's sprint model, which I really, admire their sprint processes. They're really about what is the one riskiest assumption. We're going to spend a week on that one assumption. And if we can, prove that we have that right, that will mean a ton. These test canvases that are kind of about forming hypotheses and verification. And then experimentation canvases. Oh, I just wanted to shout out, I don't know if anybody's in New York next week, but we're going to be doing a happy hour around all these tools. So it's April 24th. But yeah, so we're at the question section. I see we have a ton of questions. Maybe it might be easier. I'm looking at the chat now, but it might be easier, Carolina, if you wanted to just voice tell me some of them, because I have not been...
Sure, fair enough. Let me see, let me just go back. I think I sent you some of them. One from Joel that just got a little bit of a reaction on the chat box.
Yeah.
Is there opportunity to integrate machine learning and AI platforms to support the ideation process, i.e. application of various of business models and related outcomes?
Yeah. That's really interesting. I mean, we've been hearing, you know, the process that we use is usually, I haven't actually done that with these different technologies, but I think that the process of innovation and the, you know, kind of bounds of innovation where now we really just have an ideation, people in the room. I think with these technologies, it's going to make it exponential. A lot, you know, crowdsourcing and things like that right now are really allow us to kind of tap into, you know, insights that we might not have in the room. And it's all about getting those, you know, unusual suspects. And so how can we really, you know, use these technologies to really think about how we're pushing the bounds beyond what we're capable of in person? Yeah, I think there's definitely going to be a space for that.
Okay, there was another interesting question. How would you adapt your model process for entrepreneurs who are driving change within an enterprise?
Yeah, so I mentioned we use the process whether you are an entrepreneur and you have an idea and you literally have nothing but an idea. We use it with entrepreneurs who are, you know, maybe seed stage of their business, or they've maybe a couple rounds in past and they've kind of proven it a little bit more. And then we also use it with large corporates and teams. The process, when you're an entrepreneur versus, and so you're at a, you know, an existing company versus a startup or an entrepreneur, you know, the startup, I think the definition of a startup, it's either Steve Blank or Eric Rice, I forget who coined it, but it's like, you know, startups are in search of a business model. So even like Uber, they're you know, still considered a startup because they're still trying to prove their business model. I wouldn't say they've proven it yet. In an entrepreneur situation, you're executing. So we've got the search mode, you're searching for your business model. In an existing company, you're in execution mode. So you're executing on an existing business model. So the question is, how do we adapt the process is actually pretty similar. You probably have a lot more concrete understanding around your key resources and your activities. You're not living day to day by when are we getting invested in. So you have a little bit more stability there. But the things that you want to really think about are, you know, the startups are really hungry because they might not have that. So they're really, you know, their ability to move and experiment, because they kind of have to really fast, is they're really good at that. So I think with these private companies and internal teams, you really want to, how do we keep that motivation and that, you know, that fire under us going when we don't really have to, because we're executing on a business. We don't have to today because we don't see that in maybe 5 years or 10 years, someone's going to disrupt us. A really interesting quote, I don't know what the quote is, but kind of like a phrase from the CEO of Airbnb. They started an innovation team, and the reason he did it was, I think it was 10 years ago, or maybe it was in the 90s. The top 10 technology companies, only one of them is now in the top 10 technology companies today. So he's like, even though Airbnb is at the top of its game today, you know, you kind of, if someone can think of a way to disrupt you, if you can think of it, then someone else can think of it. So I think that's kind of the difference. I don't think the process is too different. I think it's the mind. We talk about like tool skills and mindsets. I think it's the mindset that's the biggest difference.
Yeah, there was another question in the very beginning that said, what distinguishes the designer mind? Is it a set of processes, methods, or is it a more intangible quality?
Yeah, I think it is, like I mentioned in the beginning of this talk, it's really that willingness to experiment and the willingness to prototype. I don't think that there are certain people that can only be designers and those are the only people that can be creative. I think it's really that mindset of really being able to be uncomfortable and being okay with being uncomfortable, and uncomfortability comes with being able to test things and experiment. So I think that designer mindset, it takes practice, you know, and I think anybody can do it. And I think that you can kind of qualify it a bit with, you know, things like I mentioned, experimentation, prototyping, empathy, and all those other words.
Yeah, I think that's it. We don't have anything else on the queue.
Anybody online have anything you want to talk to or ask Carley about directly?
see something pop up.
Oh, sure. Hi, it's Tim. I asked the question in the window, but I was just wondering, if a company's out there and here's your pitch, what is it? What are the signs that a company needs you? I mean, I think your stuff is great. It's very simple. I put this in the chats. It's, I read a lot of business strategy stuff, and it's so complex, it makes your head spin. But entrepreneurs are really people of action.
Yeah.
Generally, I bet this is very effective with people.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever, for example, have VC? I mean, I would bet VCs and angels want to bring you in to look at their companies, because I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs and they don't have a lot of these pieces. They don't have these pieces nailed down, and they've got some great idea and they're all enamored of it. Yeah. So anyway, I'm just wondering what the hooks are that gets you matched up with a company. I think this is really cool. Very exciting.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. Yes and no. I'd say we work with like accelerators and through that, like VCs and those types of programs. Obviously, it's startups are sometimes running so fast and obviously are really strapped for cash that it's sometimes not, we tend to work more with large corporates. I would say, like, for me, the most interfacing I do with startups is through like coaching and stuff that I'll do, whether it's through different startup or accelerator programs. But I definitely agree, and I've thought a lot about that. I think VCs with these portfolios of companies, that whether it's through some kind of workshop or something, maybe it can't be on an individual basis with the teams, but to have time to really think about their business models. A lot of the times they're making they're running off of and executing off of all these assumptions that, haven't yet been proven. So happy to talk more about that. I'll have if anybody is interested, I have my email here. Also I added, so I was going to give away 2 copies of our Design a Better Business book. If you email me, I'll send you over. I'll pick 2 random people. Any other questions?
So you have maybe a final question. We come down to a few minutes. Obviously, good sign from asking, how do you price out your services? So I guess there's interest there. How do you
that's a good question. And actually, so something that I really love about our company, we come from the traditional consulting, our founders come from traditional top, big 4 consultants. Something that's really cool is the way that we bill, or the way that we kind of price things out, is on a project basis. So it's not like we're, doing hourly billing and stuff like that. It's like, this is the end goal that we're trying to get you there. And this is the fixed fee that we, that we think that it will be. Another, a couple other things that kind of go along with that mindset of like, we're operating a little bit differently is, I mentioned these like business plans and stuff like that. Is all of our work is co-creative. So we're building strategies with the teams, because if we were to just kind of do the work and then give you the report, you might not, we're leaving with all the knowledge, and you're still getting this great insights, and they're amazing. And, they're not to say any of that's like bad, but it's really important to, especially if you're thinking about super future, super, disruptive, something that's going to really affect and impact your business, you have to have all the stakeholders in there. So just like, if we think about it as another way of working or a new way of working, it's, we're really about that co-creative strategy, and it's very workshop driven, very hands-on, very designer mindset. Again, email me, happy to talk more about that.
Let me, maybe a quick question, because it's on my mind. We're in the age of agile.
Yeah.
And a lot of designers, they don't want to have too much paperwork. They don't want to have too much process.
Yeah.
And you got every tool here I see is great. The empathy map and the customer site. Do you try to prepare people to think about, sometimes less is more? You just focus on a few of the things as opposed to.
Yeah, that's a great question. Because you don't want to be beholden to the tools. You don't want to have to use this tool. The goal is to be able to, the tools won't solve any of your problems. I'm not going to say, I'm going to take this tool out and we can solve this problem. It's really about having those strategic conversations at the right time. So it's about knowing what's in my toolbox. I have this in my toolbox. We need to have this conversation right now, being able to pull those out. Of course, when you're doing the high level strategy and the big planning stuff, then you're going to want to add a little bit more of the discipline around the process, and things like that. But definitely, you know, the goal is to get up to a point where you feel comfortable enough with the process and the tools that you're like, it's so embedded that it, you know, it doesn't feel like a kind of a disconnect between I have to carry this bag of tools along with me.
Yeah, no, I think that's clearly, I mean, there's everything you're touching on is something that kind of reacts to all of us. I think maybe final question from Madeline, and then we'll close it out. You see an increase in the part of individuals that you work with. So does this help people become more creative? And is there a way to demonstrate that?
Yeah, like have we seen shifts in how people? Yes, definitely. We did a pitch. We helped a company with a pitch to their, you know, to their board to kind of, you know, about one of the business models we worked on. And of course, they're used to PowerPoints, they're used to all that like classic stuff. And we really got them to think about how can we use, you know, how can we present this in a little bit more creative way that's still, it's still about storytelling. It's still about, you know, in the end, it's about the story. So we definitely have seen, so in that example, and actually in multiple examples, we've done this with lots of companies and helping really think about how are we telling stories. I mean, this process of design thinking, it's really about, you know, we're doing these phases to kind of build on each other and to kind of like the scientific method, prove or disprove the hypothesis. And you do that with evidence. And so when you tell a story like that, you can kind of, you know, use that process, the creative design thinking process to kind of create those stories. So yes, I definitely think that, you know, and it's pretty infectious. Like people, we bring in every type of personality from the company. And by personality, I mean more like roles. So we got the salesperson sitting next to the finance person, sitting next to the receptionist, sitting next to the, you know, the strategy team and the CEO when we bring them all into the room, because, you know, the salesperson might want to do one thing and the finance person could sit right next to them and say, we're never going to be able to make that happen. And then the receptionist is going to, you know, has that more like one-to-one customer contact. And they're like, but I know people want to feel this way. So we really try to involve everybody in it.
That's a perfect way to close this segment. Hopefully we'll keep the conversation going.
Yeah, I would love to.
It would be good for the program in terms of whether you've worked with universities before or whether we start that. But you were fantastic.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this. This was awesome.
You were great. And you can see from the questions and the reaction that we want to continue this. So thank you very, very much. And we'll keep going forward in the future.
Awesome.
I know we're down to 30 seconds. So let me thank, again, the community of practice. A lot of the folks here obviously are from IKNS. I encourage you to stay active, and get in touch with Valerie and the team over there for the different things. We have a lot of new ideas, a lot of new things we're starting up, of which this distinguished speaker is one of them. So we'd like to hear from you. And if you have ideas for speakers or people you'd like us to go for, let us know. And it's also good to nominate your colleagues and your peers. So we want to get some of our stories going. I love the way you ended also. It's about strategic conversations and stories. Everyone on the line knows how impactful that is. I also want to thank, we have a few students who are thinking about applying for the fall. And so hopefully you get a sense of some of the topics, but also hopefully there's a way that the warmth and the interaction comes through. The only other thing is say, look out probably in the next week or so, Caroline and I will send out a message. We've heard a lot about going to different areas to meet with folks. It looks like we're going to head out to San Francisco, probably May 21st for a time to get together with some of the folks out there. And we'll give you more information about it. But that was great, Carley. We still got slots open for recruitment, so if you know good people, send them to us. The date's been extended to June 15th. And we got a whole new group of folks who are going to be coming on board in the fall to replenish and re-engage and to help design a successful future. Any final things, Carolina, that I left out that you want to mention?
No, that I just added on the chat box that we will be having these on a monthly basis. So just to keep an eye on our IKNS website, I put the link there, and we will be having other talks just as good as Carley. All right.
It's a tall order, yeah. But thank you. And again, we all applaud you, Carley. Thank you very much. It was great.
Thanks for coming.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you.